negligent owners, financial Ponzi schemes, breakaway leagues, even the scourge of atrocious revamped club crests.
Erroneous! Erroneous!
English football needs someone to protect it from the vagaries of the modern game, and if you agree, update your LinkedIn, because there's a new job opening up. Here's, hopefully, everything you need to know about football's impending independent regulator, a role the UK government is threatening to impose on the Premier League against its will. What is it? Why are they resisting it? And how could it change football as we know it?
10-point deduction as a result of this breach of profit and sustainability rules.
Why's poor Everton got to be the one to get it in the meantime?
It feels very excessive, and I do feel for Everton right now.
Here's what we do know. English football is awash with money, nation-state owners, fans forced to become geopolitical experts just to decode the mechanisms controlling their clubs. And so far, football clubs have been trusted to look after their own interests, with individual clubs now worth billions of dollars, while others have gone into debt or bankruptcy just trying to keep up. Football is now central to the British economy and strategic to brand Britain, that my mate Rory Smith on the pages of the New York Times called the game possibly, quote, Britain's greatest cultural export. And it's true. We used to have an empire, now we've got the royal family, Downton Abbey and British football. And right now, there's only one of those three that people care about anymore. But for something so important, chaos still reigns. There are many instances where smaller clubs are thrown to the wolves, reckless owners have flung the teams into bankruptcy, leaving fans and entire communities bereft. Or for the Premier League teams, new owners are let in without proper long-term thought about the geopolitical chaos that can ensue if, say, international relations change. Major teams, local treasures, have been sold to nation states like Newcastle United and Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund back in October 2021. A move which prompted even Amnesty International to dive into the world of football, calling for changes to the Premier League owners and directors test, which is basically a checklist used to ensure prospective owners have the money they say they do and aren't, wanted felons.
Amnesty International have condemned the takeover due to the human rights record in Saudi Arabia. They've called on the Premier League to change the owners and directors test and accused them of paving the way for so-called sports washing.
Well, in their own words, Amnesty just asked the big question, quis custodiot ipsos custides, and if you don't speak Latin, that's who's watching the watchman.
There is good and evil must be punished.
And the British government answered, because changes, they appear to be a-coming for the sport we love.
Plans have been outlined for major reform, including an independent regulator.
Its main purpose would be to oversee a licensing system to ensure that clubs are run sustainably.
And the history of all this begins, in some ways, 139 years ago, back in 1885. That's the year Bury Football Club was founded, a club in Greater Manchester that fell to the second tier of the football pyramid between the two world wars and hasn't been much higher since. Bury, or the Shakers as they are known, they're a modest but historical club, winners of the FA Cup back in 1900 and 1903, and the proud former employers of that well-known commentator Lee Dixon, current Newcastle and England goalkeeper Nick Pope, and even 2016 Premier League winning goalkeeper Leicester City Kasper Schmeichel, who had two separate loan stints there. The Neville brothers, Gary and Phil, they were both born there, with their father, Neville, serving as a long-time club director, and their mum, Jill, was even the club secretary. And over 20 years ago now, and to be clear, not because of the Nevilles, the first sign of financial difficulties bubbled up at Bury. The club was forced to take an emergency loan for what was called, quote, cash flow problems due to poor attendance. And the Football League stepped in, punishing the team for that act with a transfer embargo. That financial buffeting was such a dagger that it was only the generosity of fans' donations that kept the club afloat, getting their names affixed to the back of the seats at the historic Gig Lane, home of the club since 1885. Yet without any kind of consistent league oversight, the financial rot continued. Former owner Stuart Day recklessly overextended the club's budget on inflated players' wages, took out a £1.25 million loan at an annual interest rate of 138%, secured by taking a mortgage out on the aforementioned Gig Lane. It was a financially irresponsible move of disaster. On the field, the club's form matched their economic nosedive off it. Relegation to League Two in 2018 compounded the financial crunch, with the club now millions of dollars in debt. A new owner, Steve Dale, he brought the club as a distressed asset for just $1.25. That's right, $1.25. And even though the club earned immediate promotion back to League One, the third tier, the books were so drowning, overwhelmed by debt, that players and staff and even taxes went unpaid for months on end. So did the water and the electricity bills. 2019, Bury forfeited the first handful of games, which was finally enough after decades of clear-to-all mismanagement and a string of unfit owners that the English Football League expelled them from League One.
For me, football's over now. There's no love for football anymore, it's just ripped it out.
The local impact of that was devastating.
There's been grown men, 50-year-old men, 60-year-old men crying. Some of them don't cry at their own daughters' weddings. They're in buckets of tears.
The club was flung into the semi-pro bowels of English football, agonising. Bury had to release 140 kids from the academy, and the community had to set up food banks just to feed club staff who'd gone for so long without pay. Fans, furious at the loss of their team to mismanagement beyond their control, they were not to blame. They howled in protest.
Football is corrupt, and that's it. It's not family, it's business, it's just money. That's all they want.
A former director named Joy Hart handcuffed herself to a drain pipe outside the club stadium with a message to the owner: "Save the club by selling it," she said, quote, "Otherwise Bury FC, that 135-year-old football club in the league, will die. And the town will die with it."
It will be the death of Bury. Simple as that. It will be so sad.
We'll get back to the Bury story in just a moment, but the sad truth is, for all of its trauma, it is no outlier. It's one of 60 times that clubs have been put into administration since 1992. Administration in UK law, it's when a company can't pay its debts. A court will install an accountant to run it to try and salvage the business. It's kind of akin to bankruptcy. And here's where things change, because the Bury story struck a chord across England. No third-tier club had ever been booted by the Football League before, let alone a former FA Cup winner.
I've just lost words now. Just absolutely devastated.
So 4 months after Bury had been expelled from the Football League in 2019, the Conservative Party stepped in and promised a, quote, fan-led review of the entire football structure that allows cases like this to happen. It was to be led by Conservative MP Tracy Crouch. No, she's no relation to Peter. Tracy's actually a right-wing politician, also an FA qualified coach, former manager of the mighty Meridian Girls Under-13s team, and don't hold it against her, a Tottenham Hotspur fan. Her report came out in 2021 and it made 47 separate recommendations organised into 10 categories, the most major one being that of an independent regulator.
That's following the collapse of the likes of Bury and Macclesfield.
For any of these recommendations to become a reality, well, it's a process. First, a bill had to pass through the British Parliament, and for that, it would need official language. It's now February 2023, and the white paper dropped, one entitled A Sustainable Future, Reforming Club Football Governance, which sounds kind of like 20,000 words you're about to read on a fan football forum, but no, it's a white paper, so it's a policy document, essentially the British version of law language being drafted. And there's momentum getting behind this whole thing about football's new oversight, because the next step was King Charles name-checking it in his November 2023 King's Speech, which is not only a rather delightful Colin Firth movie, no, it's also a real thing that really still happens, a bit like the State of the Union address, except with more silly hats sprinkled in.
Legislation will be brought forward to safeguard the future of football clubs for the benefit of communities and fans.
Now, the big clubs in the Premier League, how did they receive this? Well, let's politely say not exactly thrilled about this fast and spooling development, just charging outside of their control. Remember, before all of this, they policed themselves with no fingers or noses getting in there, causing any friction at all to their business. Their initial response, which was in an official statement, came out calling the idea of an independent regulator, quote, not necessary. Well, it's pretty clear language, and it was backed up by West Ham owner and former esteemed pornographer David Sullivan, who echoed the message when he called the proposal, quote, a terrible idea and second quote, waste of money, predicting that all it would amount to is more government bloat. And 9 days after the King's speech, in what was seen as a swift move to begin to win the battle for optics, the Premier League leapt into action. What did they do? They suddenly decided to treat poor Everton a bit like Nelson Muntz treats Millhouse in The Simpsons. What did we do?
That's for selling out your beliefs.
First, they docked Everton 10 points for, quote, financial irregularities, a moment which was shocking because, to me, why Everton? But also because the Premier League Profit and Sustainability Rules, or PSR, which Everton were charged with violating, been instituted back in 2013 to govern clubs' finances. This was the very first time a Premier League club had been punished for breaching them. Then fast forward to January of this year, when a reeling Everton, and Everton who are still appealing that first decision, were charged by the Premier League for a second time, this time alongside Nottingham Forest. Meanwhile, Manchester City's 115 charges, which were announced back in February 2023, decision on those we've been told will take longer, a lot longer, to be judged. And all of this feels a tad belated, but like a teen hiding dirty clothes in the closet after already being grounded for not cleaning their room. We've all been there, Premier League. Professor Rob Wilson, a football finance expert at Sheffield Hallam University, said, quote, this is clearly the Premier League looking to stave off the cause nationally for an independent regulator in football and show that they can regulate and govern the game accordingly. The Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, gent who's also an Everton season ticket holder, agreed, claiming the Premier League used Everton, quote, as a pawn to show that it doesn't need an independent regulator. Now, there's no timetable to implement the new government oversight of football, and it could be at least 12 to 18 months before the independent regulator arrives, with The Athletic reporting not to expect it before the 2025-26 season. The exact details of what will change will be ironed out as a bill works its way through Parliament, but we do know the broad framework. Under this new system, all professional football clubs throughout England in the league system will need a licence to operate, which will have to be approved by this new independent regulator. The regulator will actually have 4 areas to monitor. The first, and its core focus, is financial regulation. Under the current system, clubs self-monitor their finance. They report to the Premier League, which is why we're litigating right now for Everton and Manchester City years after the fact. And here's the big change. The regulator would monitor accounts in real time, so clubs would need to be on the up and up, a shift that, if it already been in place, may have saved Bury decades of anguish, strife and free fall, teetering on the financial brink, and actually been able to do something about the warning lights that have been flashing along the way. Just you wait to see the mid-table heights Everton will be able to hit once 10-point deductions are a thing of the past. 16th place, here we come.
That's the way it goes.
Second oversight is suitable ownership, which includes enhancements to the owners and directors tests. The current one is little more than just checking a bank account to make sure the potential owners have got enough cash to take over the club.
So there will be a reassessment and a re-evaluation. There will also be a much more beefed up integrity test, and that will look at issues like good character.
Now, football clubs are cultural institutions. They are deeply embedded in the communities within which they exist, and the goal going forward will be to make sure they are, yes, financially secure for generations to come, and not subject to the whims of any owner exploiting them for short-term gains. With that in mind, the third category the regulator will oversee is to preserve fan interests. One way that's been floated is a shadow board made up of fans charged with protecting club heritage, like the club name, colours and crest. So you remember Leeds United circa 2018? It needed a petition signed by fans to block the adoption of this new badge.
I think it's appalling, to be fair.
No, I don't like it.
I don't like it. It's just a bit tacky. It's just a stupid idea altogether, really.
And the petition had 50,000 signatures on the very first day that it dropped.
They've took away everything that Leeds stands for.
The final category under the independent regulator's purview is approved competitions. This one is almost certainly a direct response to the failed potential breakaway Super League. You remember when 6 Premier League clubs tried extremely briefly to join that new European-wide league of mega clubs? It was brought down hastily by raucous fan pressure, and in the future that role will fall to the independent regulator in case shame isn't enough to bully owners away from milking every possible penny out of the fans they fleece. Clubs, for their part, will have the opportunity to appeal any of the regulator's decisions to a court or tribunal, and the regulator can't make any decisions or items outside of these 4 narrow categories. So, for instance, ticket prices or agent activity would fall outside their remits. Still, the independent regulator is almost certainly coming, and their goal will be the sustainability and stability of the game as a whole. And one last note, we have to finish off the Bury FC story, because as their name suggests, the club may have been dead, but thankfully it was not buried. They have since merged with Phoenix club Bury AFC and currently play in the 9th tier of football, 5 entire levels below Wrexham.
Bury it back in it!
Football, like life, finds a way.